So today we're going to have an insane episode. We've got Mr. Jeremy Harbour here, who's an expert in mergers and acquisitions.
Detaching business from you personally is really, really important. You are not your business. Your business is not you. You need to think like a shareholder. If you buy shares in Apple and they go down, you don't panic and shit your pants. You know, you just go, oh shit, Apple's having a bad day.
You mentioned you've done a lot of startups. Obviously, you've owned, I think, 8 to 10 businesses at one time. What was the biggest headache you've had in that process, and what was the biggest lesson you learned?
I think I overvalued my own self-importance in the early days. So when I was buying these companies, I thought I was essential to them. And what I realized is when I stopped doing that, they did just fine. When you first do an acquisition, if you can do nothing for 2 weeks, if you can just sit on your hands for 2 weeks, that is the best thing that you can do, because the second you announce the acquisition, everyone starts searching for another job because they think, oh, I'm about to be made redundant or something terrible is going to happen or whatever.
So today we're going to have an insane episode. We've got Mr. Jeremy Harbour here, who's an expert in mergers and acquisitions. Today we're going to go into some of Jeremy's backstory, how you can make more money by buying other businesses, basically stacking them together, and also how to exit businesses and maybe how to prepare those for sale. You really gave me some great advice before we even started this on my own business, but a few things was very, very helpful. So I know there's going to be a lot of value for the audience. The first question I want to ask you, Jeremy, is how did you first learn about mergers and acquisitions? And then also, you didn't come from a background of like a high-level university and MBAs and all that type of jazz that most people in that world, from my opinion, seem to be from.
Yeah, and honestly, that's part of the problem with the industry, is because everybody either comes through a kind of legal background or a financial background, and then it ends up in M&A, and most of the M&A is driven by corporate finance companies or investment banks. And the problem is that that's fine when you're buying the largest brewer in the world, or Coca-Cola is buying some other drinks company, but it's not particularly useful for everyday businesses. 50% of any major economy's economic output is from small to medium-sized owner-managed businesses, and most people work in those kind of businesses as well. 9 out of 10 people in the UK, for example, if you don't work for the government, which seems like everybody nowadays, but if you don't work for the government, 9 out of 10 people work in a business that employs less than 50 people. So they are the kind of lifeblood of the economy. And so if you want to learn M&A, you have to learn how to buy and sell those kinds of companies. And not many people are in a position to be able to do that. And I stumbled across it purely by accident. I had a telecoms company. I had several businesses when I was growing up. Left school when I was 15 to pursue one of those businesses, and that kind of morphed into a telecommunications company. Now, telecoms in the 1990s, when this was booming, it was expanding really quickly. But then after that, a bit like the Big Bang, there's the collapse afterwards, and the collapse was a consolidation where there wasn't really any new customers you could go out and get. Everybody that wanted a phone had a phone, so all you could do is poach other people's customers. And a bit like with the insurance industry, where you have your insurance comes up once a year. Yeah. Back in those days, there weren't prepaid phones, there was only contracted phones, and so if the contract wasn't up, you couldn't get the customer. And so the easiest way to grow was to acquire another company that had customers already and add those customers to your database. Now, I'd always thought, I can't do that, I don't have any money, the bank won't lend me any money, that would be impossible. And then after I had a few meetings with people that were trying to buy my business, I realized they didn't have any money, the bank wouldn't give them any money, so they were in exactly the same position I was. They just had a pitch that they could use in order to acquire my company. And so I just learned that pitch, and I went to their side of the desk basically and went around trying to buy a business.
How did you specifically start that process in terms of sourcing companies and even maybe outreaching those companies you were looking to buy, like in the early days?
Yeah, in the early days, I made all the mistakes that everybody makes. I went to business brokers, and I didn't realize, I thought business brokers were designed to sell businesses. Actually, business brokers, the thing that keeps their lights on is the fees they charge you to list with them. They only sell about 8% of the businesses that list with them, and there's no qualifications in the UK to be a business broker. So most of these people are people that came out of being an estate agent or a car dealer or something like that and decided to sell businesses. So these are not global experts in business. These are people that are good at getting you to pay them $2,000 or $3,000 to list your business for sale. So I went down a lot of those kind of rabbit holes, and all I found was rabbit shit. rather than anything particularly useful. I actually got most of my deals in the early days from just going out networking. I used to go out networking to sell mobile phones in my mobile phone business. So any business event I would go to and just meet other, business owners, and that gave me lots of opportunity. And so that was the main place I got my deals in the early days. But as I kind of evolved and as I grew, I realized there are lots of kind of outreach things you can do. And I think the easiest way to look at this is, we're trying to buy owner managed businesses. So a bit like you would do marketing for any business, you can use a lot of those same techniques to find business owners that might want to get out of their business, basically. So treat it as a business, but the product is companies. You're buying and selling companies instead of buying and selling services.
Quick interjection of the podcast. If you're an online coach who's looking to scale the business, get their first 5K month, 10K month, or even get to 50 to 100K a month, we have helped hundreds of trainers do this at this point, and I've personally generated over $14 million online in the fitness industry. We have a proven methodology that works, provided you're willing to do the work. Now, if you want to book in a free business audit, we'll break down exactly where you are now, where you want to go, and what's currently holding you back. Hit the link below this video and below the podcast to find exactly how we can help you. Pick a time, and we will walk you through the process of where your business is at and what exponential growth looks like. Now, back to the podcast. Do you think the fact that you didn't come from a conventional university corporate background maybe gave you an advantage because you had street smarts, understood, say, for example, marketing, and I've listened to lots of podcasts before in terms of how you were selling stuff as like an entrepreneur at school, basically selling things?
Yeah, it's helped me on so many levels, because the first one is the ability to create empathy and rapport with business owners. If you come from a corporate finance background, you went to university, you then went into the corporate world, you have zero in common with an entrepreneur that's run a business for 20, 30 years. They literally cannot understand how each other think, and they can't create a proper relationship around exiting the business. They can probably have a perfectly civil conversation about football and other things, but in terms of really being able to empathize with what they've been through and where they are, it is much easier to do as an entrepreneur. So that helps me enormously, because I can understand the motivations better, and I can understand the solution to those motivations and what they really need to have, not what the other people would typically have on offer. And it also teaches you, entrepreneurial skills are really about creative problem solving. So every day in business, you're faced with a number of problems, and you have to come up with more and more creative ways of overcoming them. And so when you approach deal making as a creative problem solver, you can find opportunities in almost anything, whereas most of the competitors that I have are following a kind of cookie cutter playbook where there's only one way to do this, and if it doesn't fit in that mold, there's no deal to be done. Whereas actually we quite like things that are a bit off piste or a little bit tricky, because it means no one else can do the deal, and if no one else can do the deal, the supply and demand economics are
more leverage then, I guess.
Yeah, you can get your deal done the way you want to do it, because there's no one else in town that can do that.
Do you think the M&A route works across pretty much any type of business? So like a lot of people who would be listening to this would be from the online info space, maybe a lot of them own online fitness businesses. Do you think that would be an example people could look to acquire other businesses and basically bolt them all together? Yeah,
absolutely. So look, this idea of buying businesses and bolting them together, people get lost in the weeds with this stuff quite a bit. There's a really simple mechanism at play, which is if you look at all of the businesses on the planet, it's like a pyramid. There's a few at the top that are really big, and there's hundreds of thousands at the bottom that are really small. And if you look at the universe of people that could buy those businesses, it's the opposite. There's no at the bottom that can buy all of these ones, and there's tons of people at the top that can buy the big ones. So what you want to do is you want to move up the scale pyramid, because as you move up the scale pyramid, the audience of buyers gets bigger, and when you have more buyers than there are sellers, the price exponentially increases as well. So if you're a info product entrepreneur doing $1 million a year in revenue, there's very few people that can buy that business or pay you a decent amount for that business. But if you could get to 5 or 10 million of revenue, suddenly there's a much wider audience. Now, to grow your info business from 1 million to 10 million organically is very, very difficult. You probably find behind a glass ceiling within the first 3 to 4 years, which is very hard to then break through. Your attrition of customers roughly meets your input of customers, and so you're kind of swinging your arms, but you're not really landing any punches. And so at that point, the easiest way to go, exponentially bigger is to make an acquisition. Now, acquisitions can be horizontal or they can be vertical. So a horizontal would be to buy another information product company. You've obviously got, marketing and delivery things that would be very similar across the two businesses. So there's obvious synergies across the two businesses, and you just increase the scale doing more of the same type of thing that you do now. The alternative is to go vertical, which is to start to integrate supply services up and down. So if you're helping people in the fitness industry, for example, you might buy a marketing agency that could help them build websites and develop tools, or you might buy a software developer that can help them develop apps, or you might buy other things that would integrate with their business either up or down the supply chain that might not be directly in their business, but adds a lot of value to that. So when I had my telecoms company, for example, I bought an IT business because IT and telecoms were closely integrated. We were spending a fortune on IT, plus our customers typically used to be the people that were responsible for the IT budget in their business as well as the telecoms budget in their business. So we'd be talking to the same decision maker about those different services. So the first company I bought was a telecoms company. That was a horizontal acquisition. The second one was an IT company, which was a vertical acquisition.
Interestingly, I actually went through an acquisition working for a company in my previous life as an estate agent. I previously worked for a company called Aston Mead that got bought by the Leaders Romans Property Group, a big corporation in the UK. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see that transition as an employee at the time. Mm-hmm. Do you think, and even for example, maybe your telecoms businesses and like where I worked, do you think that a company coming in, if it's fulfilling the same product, they should have the same brand across the board and rebrand, or is that a very case-by-case scenario?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. Actually, I think it's the biggest mistake people make in acquisition is rebranding. Yeah, it's a total waste of time and energy, and just confuses all the customers. At the end of the day, the thing that you really want when you acquire a company is the goodwill. It's the inertia that business has created over the years that's been set up. So the telecoms company that I bought had been going for 13 years when I bought it, and that was 13 years of relationships it had created with its clients. Now, we immediately rebranded it to our name because we thought that we want to be bigger. It was like a Billy Big Bollocks ego-driven thing, stick our name above the door. But you just spend the next 6 months explaining to people, oh no, we're actually the same, we're just called this now, and it was a complete waste of energy. Whereas in fact, if we had maintained that brand, we could keep it as a sub brand, we could even do other things in that brand. It wouldn't necessarily detract from or dilute what we were already doing, and it would have saved us a huge amount of time and money. And in fact, when people put roll-ups together, the most common mistakes we see, one of them is leveraging, so borrowing loads of money to put businesses together, and that's a really, really dumb idea. You should never leverage to buy volatile assets. So you wouldn't mortgage your house and buy Bitcoin. Yeah. Well, some people listening probably would, but you shouldn't mortgage your house and buy Bitcoin. And because it's a volatile asset, you have to pay this money back. This can go up and down a lot. So the same with a business. Business's value can go up and down a huge amount. So you shouldn't be using debt finance that you have to pay back in order to buy something that can halve in value overnight or double in value overnight. So you need to use, so leverage is the first reason I see them fail. The second one is people getting bogged down in centralizing functions, rebranding, trying to rinse out all of the synergies on day one. The business should stand up on its own 2 feet from day one. It should make money. It should do everything independently to begin with, and all those synergies and other things are kind of the icing on the cake, or the cherry on the icing on the cake. It's a nice to have, but don't construct the deal around getting that stuff at the beginning.
What's funny you explaining the business is because when I worked for this company, when this was happening, the company I worked for was like a premium brand. Leaders was respectfully like a bargain bucket brand. Yeah. So constantly we had to keep telling people like, oh, we're still exactly the same people, the same things, just like like the amount of time that's wasted and that credibility you almost lost. Yeah,
and also how much it pisses off all the people involved. I mean, when you first do an acquisition, if you can do nothing for 2 weeks, if you can just sit on your hands for 2 weeks, that is the best thing that you can do, because the second you announce the acquisition, everyone starts searching for another job because they think, oh, I'm about to be made redundant or something terrible is going to happen or whatever. If then it's just business as usual and everything carries on exactly the same, everybody kind of calms down, relaxes, and they can get on with stuff. As entrepreneurs, we love change and we love the challenges that change brings. Everyone else hates it. That's why they have a job. So don't impose that on these people, because it will drive them crazy.
I think sometimes entrepreneurs just want to break stuff to fix stuff.
Yeah. We like to throw a hand grenade in a room
Yeah.
just to see what will happen. Yeah.
You never know.
It's why we like things like Brexit and stuff like that, just for the pure joy of the outcome.
With rolling up companies together like that and in acquisitions, how easy and effective do you think is the no money down scenario? How much capital would you be having to look into put into a lot of these businesses? Say if they're turning over 3 to 5 million a year, 5 to 10 million a year, which is the range I've heard you talk about looking to acquire businesses in before.
Yeah, so look, different sectors kind of seem to have a different size ratio. I mean, we've talked a bit about software companies. In software companies, it tends to be a much lower, sub 1 million revenue is quite a decent size SaaS business. If you get into service-driven businesses, 3 to 5 million tends to be about right. And if it's a more product-led type of business, it could be kind of sub 10 million. But that's definitely a sweet spot for getting deals done without having to put capital into the transaction yourself. And again, it comes back to this idea that at the bottom of the pyramid, there's no buyers, and that the bottom of the pyramid is different in different industries. But as I say, in software, sub 1 million, in service businesses, so like an electrical contractors or something like that, it's in that 3 to 5 million range. If they're smaller than that, they really don't have many other options. So if they have a motivation to transition away from that business, they're going to have to come up with some kind of deal structure with a buyer that extricates them from the business, but also gets them what they want for the business. Because if they just sell it in the open market, they're going to get hardly anything for it. They'll probably struggle to get a year's worth of profits back out of the business in terms of an exit value. So what happens in most cases is that people decide not to sell and just to take as much cash as they can out as possible and then close the thing down. And we're seeing that more and more now, by the way, because 40% of small businesses belong to baby boomers, and they all need to retire. They needed to retire 10 years ago. They really need to retire now. And a lot of those, they just don't like the offer that they're being made. And so they're just going to close the business down. I saw a company not long ago that was doing 10 million in revenue. It was profitable. And they literally just locked the doors and walked away. Rather than sell it because they couldn't find a buyer. Again, they went to a broker. The broker told them it was worth $1 gazillion, and it clearly wasn't. They met with 4 or 5 people that offered them significantly less than $1 gazillion, and they decided, this, I'm going to just close it and go and retire. Whereas actually, if they'd met somebody like me or one of my community, we would have come up with a transaction for them that made sense, that extricated them from the business perhaps over a period of time, and got them what they wanted and got us what we wanted as well.
In terms of starting businesses, the way I think now is very different than it was 3 to 5 years ago. From experience of start with the end in mind. So like starting a business to sell it versus starting it just to make a profit is very different.
Yeah.
If someone's looking to start a business to exit and sell in 3 to 5 years, what are the key things that you think they should focus on making sure it's set up correctly?
Yeah, so look, the first thing is you don't make money running businesses, you make money when you sell them. So you're not ever going to make enough from extracting a percentage of the profits to have the kind of lifestyle that perhaps you've seen on Instagram or that you really want. So you have to build a capital event. Capital events are what really create wealth, not cash flow. And cash flow changes all the time anyway. Businesses, you're either constantly reinvesting profits to keep going, which means you haven't got the cash flow to take out of them, or if you are taking the cash out, then the business will go into decline and it will it's entropy. It goes ultimately to zero, so gently to the scene of the crash, I think, is the way they describe it. So yeah, you should build it definitely with the idea of selling. Having said that, I did quite a few startups in my younger years, and then I realized that I could buy businesses, and you kind of, the first 3 years of a startup, you only put money in, you don't get any money out, and it's like pushing a big rock up a hill. And once you got it to the top of the hill, it starts to roll down. Never rolls down as fast as you'd like, and you still have to keep pushing it to get some inertia. But it starts to get a bit easier after that first 2 to 3 years. But you only have so many 2 to 3 years in your lifetime that you can commit to doing startups, and they suck up a huge amount of your energy and a huge amount of your money. Ironic, really, because most people start for the idea of getting rich and having loads of spare time, and then it takes away all their time and all their money. But if you buy a business that's already pushed the rock up the hill and it's rolling down the other side, even if it's rolling, even if it's a bit you've saved 3 years and loads of capital, you've got revenue, you've got profit, you can, even if your idea you had in the shower was to do something completely different, you could pivot an existing business to do the thing that you thought of in the shower. So buy something that has the same type of customer and then add your product idea to that business, or get that business to pay for the R&D for your product idea or the software development or whatever it is that it needs to pay for. So I would always buy a business that's already going versus try and do something from scratch, just because you have something, you've saved 3 years, you've saved a ton of money, and you can pivot into whatever it was that you thought was a good idea.
You mentioned you've done a lot of startups. Obviously, you've owned, I think, 8 to 10 businesses at one time, which I think was
many,
stressful for you.
12 I think is. I mean, there's times when I've owned more, but yeah.
What was the biggest headache you had in that process, and what was the biggest lesson you learned?
Yeah, so I think I overvalued my own self-importance in the early days. So when I was buying these companies, I thought I was essential to them, and I would go in and I would micromanage and change and do things and get involved in all of the businesses and treat them all like they were something to me, and that's not scalable. And I found that out the hard way, in terms of just being completely burnt out and overstressed. And what I realized is when I stopped doing that, they did just fine. So I thought I was fixing everything and that without me they'd all die, and then when I wasn't there everything was fine. And so that was a really good lesson in entrepreneurs are great at that startup phase, but that's a really narrow band of expertise, and after that you're not particularly useful, so you should get out of the way. And I think if you get out of the way and focus on, because when you start, it's all about customer value, is product market fit, coming up with something that people will buy, figuring out how you sell it, how do I pitch this so that somebody buys it. Once you've figured all those things out, all of those things become jobs. So all the finance stuff you did, well, that's a job. All the marketing stuff you do, well, that's a job. All the sales stuff you do, that's a job. All the management stuff you do, that's also a job. So what does the entrepreneur do at that point? Well, if you focus on the other side of the balance sheet, if you like, which is the shareholder value. So shareholder value comes from mergers, acquisitions, joint ventures, and exits. If you focus on that as your day job, you stay out the way of all the management, which is great. They can get on and run the business, and they're much happier because you're not around them off all the time. And you add real value, because if you do a joint venture, you can double the size of the business. If you do a merger, you can double the size of the business. Nothing you can do in there is going to double the size of the business.
With that, how long a process did that take you to learn that lesson of not
years?
Yeah.
Like a decade, the first decade at least.
I think, and this is how I feel, and I think most entrepreneurs are the same, is like, I'm a builder, I love building and creating stuff, but I don't want to run the fucking thing.
And you think you're good at it. And unfortunately, like I say, we have a very narrow band of expertise. And I actually think, entrepreneurs by nature, we're actually not the smartest tools in the box. We like to think we are, but we're not the smartest tools in the box. And I think if we were really smart, we'd never start a business, because you'd understand how fucking difficult it is and how much you're going to sacrifice to do it. But we have this belligerence about us that makes us do it anyway. As I say, without us, it wouldn't get going. But after that, we need to get out of the way, because we can add a lot more value moving up the entrepreneurial ladder and focusing on the shareholder value than we can sitting in the business and picking everybody off.
When you're looking at acquiring businesses, do you look heavily at like the leadership teams, like the character traits, the people there, the personalities involved, and is there certain traits you see in people who generally seem to succeed and do very well?
So most of the businesses I buy, the average company we acquire is 23 years old. So most of them a lot of them are over 23 years, and some of them some are less, but the average is 23 years. So actually the way we look at it is, if you're 23 years old, you've been through a couple of major economic downturns in your history. You've had the global financial crisis, you've had COVID, you've had the European debt crisis, you've had a whole bunch of stuff go wrong that you've managed to survive. And so, for us, that resilience is a really important factor in the businesses that we acquire. And then the other part of it is a little bit opportunistic. So if we can structure the deal in the way that we want, and if the business does what we're expecting, then that's a deal for us. So we don't get too lost in trying to, do psychological profiles of people or do anything like that. We really just look at has it got the longevity? Has it survived? And does it generate, the revenue and the profits that we're looking for? And can we do a deal with them? Are these people that are up for doing something and that we can work with? And if those three things align, that's probably more important than like the industry or what the business does or a bunch of other factors.
What's the biggest mistake you've made in an acquisition?
Where do we even start? Look, we're always pushing boundaries and trying to do more and more and more. In business generally, you get screwed over by lots of people. That just happens. It's just part of the day job. You always regret, putting your faith in trusting some dickhead who screws you over. But after a while, you start to realize, there's that old adage, the best revenge is success. And honestly, just getting back on the horse and going again and making sure that, you're living your best life is way more important than dwelling on some, fucktard that tried to screw you over for pocket money. But that happens a lot. And that's always, in my younger years, that was very emotionally challenging to deal with. And I think as you get older and as it happens more, you become more and more stoic about the whole thing. So it becomes a lot easier to handle because it's just part of the game. And of course, there's protections and there's things you can do that limit your downside. And that's one of the things that you learn is to try and make your gambles, because all business is a gamble, try and make your gambles more asymmetric so that your downside is protected and you only leave room for upside. And we do that a lot in our deal structures, is creating an asymmetric kind of deal structure where we can win but we can't really lose. And so that's important. But yeah, I created this community, the Harbour Club, back in 2009, and having that community accelerated my own learning about my own topic, because one, I had to explain it to people, so that teaches you a lot about what you do, and the other one was we just had to have new stuff to talk about, so we pushed the boundaries and we did, since I launched the Harbour Club in 2009, I've taken over 100 companies public, and I'd never even looked at public markets or using the stock market for doing deals before, and that was a huge learning curve. The first two goes were horribly painful in terms of mistakes and lessons learned. But you survive those things, you take those lessons, you add those into the next iteration, and the next iteration is better than the last, and the next iteration after that is better than the one before that. It's the same in everything. You either stop growing, or you're going to have some school fees along the way.
You mentioned the emotional roller coaster of business, which I think never stops. A lot of the people listening to this are probably maybe even their mid-20s, making £20,000 to £50,000 a month, maybe less. You might be like online fitness coaches. What would be your advice in terms of how you've learned to maybe manage that emotional roller coaster in terms of when business is flat and struggling, and also maybe even not going overboard when you've had huge successes?
Yeah, I think, look, detaching business from you personally is really, really important. You are not your business. Your business is not you. You need to think like a shareholder. If you buy shares in Apple and they go down, you don't panic and shit your pants. You just go, oh shit, Apple's having a bad day. You need to be like a shareholder. You need to be like the person that you're not the. You need to be a business owner, not a business runner. And then, of course, the Stoicism stuff that I've mentioned. There's the essays of Marcus Aurelius. There's quite a few good books actually about Stoicism. But at its core principle, its absolute simplicity is kind of accepting things you can't change and changing the things you can't accept. It's that idea of most of the things are outside of your control. So just let go of them. Forget about those, and look at what are the 1, 2, or 3 things you could do today that are in your control that can have a positive impact on the situation that you find yourself in. Because if you try and think about everything, including the things that are outside your control, it's horribly overwhelming. There are times where I'm involved. We've got over 100 companies in various stages of due diligence, and we've got things going wrong, we've got things going right, we've got things that are just going along like we would expect. And if I spent every day going through all of that and panicking about all the things that weren't working out, or that could fall apart, or that could go wrong, or that could blow up in my face, or whatever, I'd never sleep. It would be horrific. But today I got up and I went for my morning walk, which is very meditative. So I normally stick like a weight vest on and just go for a walk in the sunshine, and like an hour and a half, something like that, and just get all my thoughts clear for the day of everything that I'm going to do. Then I have my coffee, and then I sit down and start working. So until I've done, my kind of morning routine stuff, I don't do anything that's even slightly work related. And then just face the things you have right in front of you, and make sure you have that positive momentum. I think one of the things is when you get overwhelmed, because look, business is a bit of a pendulum. When things are going wrong, everything goes wrong, and when things are going right, everything goes right. That's probably made a noise. So you just have to get used to the fact that when it rains, it pours, and don't worry about it too much, because it will go the other way soon, and the pendulum will start swinging back the other way, and you just have to get on with it, because what tends to happen is when you're under stress, you become you're not very resourceful, and when you're not very resourceful, you tend to make things worse. So if you're finding yourself a bit overwhelmed, just pick one thing you're going to do today, and that would make a difference, and just do that one thing. You can ignore everything else. You can ignore all the and the messages that people are sending you, and the phone calls where people are shouting abuse at you and all that sort of stuff, and just do the one thing that takes you one step closer to what you're trying to achieve.
There's a saying I really like, and it's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain.
Yeah,
it's just like I found that over a period of time. It's like you have cycles where like almost anything you touch just works. And it's your ego almost gets too big at that point, and then something you
universe teaches you a lesson.
Hard as well.
So I call it the reverse Midas, which is Midas, everything turns to gold. Reverse Midas, everything turns to shit. Yeah, whatever you touch seems to go wrong. But you have to get it out of your system and realize it's not you. It's just the cycles.
Has that morning routine changed for you over the years? And obviously, you've lived in different places all over the world.
Yeah, so it changes a lot because, and also every time you travel, it's like a reset for what you're going to do. And also what I find is that if you build too much of a morning routine, it's very hard to stick to. But if you do one thing for a couple of weeks and then add something and then add something and then add something, before long, you end up with like a really killer, amazing morning routine. So I'm just about to go away, and then when I come back, I think we're back for like a week, and then we're away again. And so but both of those trips will disrupt that kind of morning routine. And then when I get back on that final time, I think I'm here for like a couple of months back to back, although I'm sure my wife will have other plans. But in theory, I'm here for a couple of months. And that's where I'd probably really tune in that daily routine.
Do you try and structure your year, for example, almost in like work sprints, almost how you've like explained there?
Yeah, so doing deals is a feast or famine activity anyway, and in fact, you can't really plan it because there's so much that relies on other human beings, and we're really unpredictable human beings. So I actually always joke with my community, like I'll book the most expensive resort in the Maldives or something like this, and you can guarantee the second you step off the plane, that's when the deal wants to happen, so I've actually joked in the community that this is a way of getting a deal to close, is to try and take a really expensive holiday, like book a really expensive holiday. That'll get the deal to start working again, because as soon as you try and take a break, it suddenly wakes up and wants to close.
How do you manage your work whilst away? Do you still work a lot, or just work around it?
Sporadically, yeah. So I mean, as I say, it's kind of feast or famine. So when it's busy, it's busy, and now it's busy because if you're listening at a different time of the year, it's the beginning of the year. Everyone's just kind of come back and they're all hungry and ready to do stuff. I think we were joking before we started that all the people you owe money to come back a week early, and all the people the people that owe you money seem to come back really late. So that's always an entertaining start to the year, because there's everything kind of wakes up and at its different paces. But now, for example, everything is super hot. Everybody wants to get shit done. Everybody's got this ambition to get stuff moving. So you basically have to go with that. So when make hay while the sun shines. So when everybody's got this appetite, this attitude to get done, lean into it, because on the other side of that there'll be a little down period, and that down period you can go and enjoy yourself.
With what's happening in the world, it's the 13th of January, say 20th of January, Donald Trump is inaugurated as United States President.
Yep.
How do you see that affecting things over the next 12 months?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I mean, look, He's obviously super pro business, and so I think from an entrepreneur's perspective, particularly being in the US, it's going to be a very positive time to be an entrepreneur. So I think getting stuff started, doing deals, all of that kind of stuff is going to get much easier in the US. I think from a foreign policy perspective, he might be a little less globalist than previous presidents, and in fact even less so than his previous presidency. I mean, he's a bit of a known quantity because we had him before, and actually, we live in the Middle East, and the Middle East had its probably best time ever while he was, or best time in my lifetime during his last presidency. So I think we might see a big calming down of what's going on here, or World War III. It's a bit of a toss of the coin, but if it's like the last presidency, I think it will calm things down quite a bit. Europe, unfortunately, I talked about the pendulum of luck in business. Politics is a pendulum as well. So politics tends to swing to the left and then swing back to the right. And the more extreme the left, the more extreme the right. And you can see this in Argentina, where they just had pretty much a communist government that went to a libertarian government. Now, the libertarian government is really sorting out Argentina's problems and has fixed everything. And they now have the lowest inflation for 30 years, the first budget surplus for 30 years. That he's really fixing that country, and the Trump presidency is likely to do a similar thing in the US. But unfortunately, Europe and the UK in particular are still at the predecessor to Javier Milei in Argentina phase, which is the kind of student union communist debate society, found themselves accidentally in charge and now don't know what to do with it, apart from all the stuff they thought was a great idea when they were in the student union. And unfortunately, it's going to be really toxic for the UK economy. It's already toxic for the UK economy. The UK economy has already been screwed, and now they're in a really difficult position because they either have to cut taxes and bring growth back, which will completely alienate their core values, or they have to go again. Exit taxes, wealth taxes, all those kind of things would be their logical next step to try and prove that socialism, despite the fact it's never ever worked and has killed hundreds of millions of people, that they just need to give it one last go.
The reality of what they're doing to me seems like insanity, because even the things you mentioned there, the exit taxes, and as soon as you start talking about that, bang, everyone's out like bouncing.
Well, to be honest, I think all the people that matter are already out, and just from what I see, and if they're not out, they've got one foot out already. They've already got a company in another country, or they've made some sort of plan around that. So it's basically done, the policies are so bad. I don't see where they go from here, really.
Do you think there's a way back for the UK in that?
Yeah, absolutely. A new government. So
Nigel Farage.
He's
Andrew Tate's got a party started now as well, I saw.
That was funny because he said he's going to stand for Prime Minister, which of course you can't do in the UK. You stand for Parliament and then your party elects a leader and that leader becomes Prime Minister. So I think he's thinking of the American presidential system, which, anyway. So not possible, but makes a good tweet, I guess. I think it needs to be something like the Reform Party, or what the Reform Party stands for. I think the leadership is a bit toxic and maybe not the right one. But basically, Labour shouldn't have had a chance, and they got in because the Tories were so shite. So if the Tories are so shite and Labour is so shite, then it might just be the fact that there's no other choice. And I guess that's kind of like the American problem, because when it was Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in the 2016 election, I actually put on Twitter, it's like offering people a punch in the face or a kick in the nuts. Is it really, is that really the two options that they have? I think that's the same in the UK. There is not a credible option for leader, but obviously, the government has become way too big. The cost of the state has become way too big. The debt has become way too big, and it needs a complete bonfire of the whole civil service and a kind of libertarian approach to the whole approach to government. It's not sustainable, and particularly in the world as it stands at the moment. Here we are sitting in a country which has really figured out that lean government model, and the lifestyle's amazing. There's no crime. It's it's a dream to live in. Compared to, I go back to London, I can't wear a watch, I can't wear anything expensive, I can't, it's just not livable.
How long have you lived in Dubai for now? 5 years?
Since 2020, COVID refugee.
I think that most people moved over from there.
Well, I was in Singapore before that though for 12 years, so I've lived out of the UK for a long time.
With you being here, what do you think is the biggest differences you see between, say, Dubai and the UK in terms of how they've got the government, everything here just works? Like, it almost seems like they actually want to make this place good, whereas in the UK it's like they're intentionally trying to make it as difficult as possible. To do well.
Unfortunately, bureaucracy breeds bureaucracy. So when you have a large amount of civil servants making all the decisions and doing everything, they tend to vote for more of themselves. So they create more and more of these things, and it's got to the point where now 45% of the people work for the government. Everything is impossibly expensive. So the refurbishment of the House of Lords is £25 billion. How the can anything to do with a building be £25 billion? I mean, the Burj Khalifa cost $1.5 billion to build. So we're talking, just insane amounts of money, because it's not their money. They've got no reason to negotiate prices down. There's no incentive for them to get a good deal for taxpayers. It's like free money. And everybody talks about the 40 million tax raid that Rachel from accounts just did. Our debt repayments in the UK are 135 billion a year. So, and those debt repayments mainly go to China and BlackRock, who are the two largest holders of UK debt. So she took 40 million from small business owners and gave it to China and BlackRock, and that wasn't even enough to pay the interest to China and BlackRock. So she has to borrow more money from China and BlackRock in order to pay for the services that she's promising to deliver, like pouring more money into the NHS and pouring more money into all of these horribly inefficient government projects that they have. So it's completely unsustainable. It's broken. It can't work.
Talking about money, when you have a capital event and you sell a business, where is the safest place to squirrel away this money? Because obviously there's limits in terms of what you're insured up to. In the UK, was it 100 grand? US is what, $250,000?
Yeah, they have a couple of different guarantors, but so when you bank with a bank, the money I've owned a bank, so I understand all this stuff. So when you deposit money into your account, that money isn't yours. It belongs to the creditors of the bank. But if you buy assets in the bank, so if you buy bonds and shares and things like that, they actually belong to you. So you are the legal rightful owner of those things. So this is why most wealthy people don't leave lots and lots of cash in the bank. They tend to be quite heavily invested because it doesn't then matter on the solvency of the bank. The other thing is I don't use, for my main banking, I don't use retail banks. I mean, for debit cards and stuff I do, but for investment, my main banking relationship is with Julius Baer. So Julius Baer is the largest private bank in Switzerland. The largest bank in Switzerland is UBS, but UBS also do mortgages and casino banking and investment banking and all this kind of stuff. Whereas Julius Baer is a pure private bank; it's just for private wealth. So they don't take risks with taking companies public and doing all those kind of things, which I get enough of that risk in my day job. So they're the largest pure private bank in Switzerland. And then within my investment in Julius Baer, I would be exposed to mainly things like structured products, bonds, stocks, and other investments, because those ultimately belong to me, not to the bank. But deposits you have with the bank technically belong to the creditors if something were to happen.
So essentially you give them the money to invest on your behalf.
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of decision and a lot of kind of control over what it goes into. Yeah.
You became a father. How old were you when you became a father?
40. I'm 50 now. So
you don't look it.
Yeah. So 10 years old. My daughter is now. Yeah.
How did that impact your business career? Did that change any perspectives and the way you looked upon things?
Yeah. So actually, I mean, one of the things I quite like doing business with other people who have good solid families. One of the things I've learned is people that are serial divorcers aren't very good business partners. So people that have been divorced, 2 or 3 times. Once seems to be okay, because I think
once, so.
yeah, okay. Once seems to be okay, but the 2 to 3 times ones actually tend to make quite bad business partners. And people having kids tend to be much better business partners as well. And in fact, quite a few of the, I talked about, the number of times you get screwed over in a business, or people try and screw you over. Often it's those kind of lone wolf type people that don't have a stable home domestic situation, don't have kids, or if they have kids, they're estranged or whatever. So you can tell a lot about somebody, I think, by the quality of their relationship and the quality of their relationship with their children, like how much time they're spending with their children as well, not just farming them out to other things. Having said that, I left it late. I was, young, free and single for a lot of years. I had a couple of long relationships in there, but basically, I had a lot to get out of my system. And also, I think, when you're building businesses as well, you're not the best person to be in a relationship with, because the business will come first and the relationship comes second, and they fucking hate that. So you kind of need a little bit of success and wealth under your belt before you're ready to commit to a relationship properly. And also, I think, men, we mature much slower than women do. We're still kids when we're 50, 60 years old, whereas women tend to grow up a lot faster. So when they're ready for a relationship, we're probably not the best marriage material. So I think getting married and having kids at that stage in my life was the perfect time for me. Obviously everybody's different, but it was the perfect time for me because I felt I was mature enough to do it. Plus I have the time. I can spend time with my kids. I'm at home all the time. So I see my kids growing up. I spend a lot of time with them. I have a great relationship with them. And that would have been impossible in my 20s and 30s.
Do you think men would be more successful if they have stable relationships, or if they have multiple relationships? I'm thinking about a friend of mine in particular.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Having a stable relationship is a massive catalyst for success, and it's just pure time and attention. If you want to be successful in business, you have to dedicate a lot of time and attention to that. And dating also takes up a lot of time and attention, and it's a bit of an obsession, and it's an obsession that's driven at a very primal level, so it's going to always win. So if you have 24 hours in the day, this whole thing about these successful people have the same hours in the day as you have, but if you spend half of those hours chasing women or men, or whatever your predilection is, if you spend half your time chatting, looking, searching, whatever, then you don't have the same hours in your day as that other person has. So it really does. I mean, it's incredibly liberating to know that side of things is just taken care of. And if it's a proper partnership, if you really are in it together, then you know that there's a whole bunch of things that are taken care of that would also further encroach on your time. Stupid shit. Like this morning, we got the quote back for the driver to pick us up from Geneva Airport and take us to Courchevel, and it's like double what it was last year. We're thinking, like, why is it double what it is? So I can either just pay it and be done with it, or she'll spend an hour on the phone with them arguing and get it for the same price as last year. So that's done, finished. I don't have to deal with any of that. I can come and do a podcast instead. So just stupid little things like that, compounded again, over and over again, over 100 different examples. And it's incredibly liberating.
Do you see many examples where romantic partners work well together in a business? I've seen lots of examples of that. I'm not sure I could do that. I've done lots of fun business things with my wife, but I think I stay at home all the time and with the kids all the time. I think if I was in a business with my wife as well, it would add another stress dynamic that I don't think would be particularly helpful to our relationship. I quite like the idea that she has her things and I have my things, and we can talk about them together without them being emotionally entangled. Makes a lot of sense. And in terms of your own development over the last few years, how have you developed your skills in terms of learning about mergers and acquisitions more, or even just running businesses? Have you worked with people to learn certain skills, or do you focus on reading, or what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a real mixture of everything. So I don't read as much as I would like, but I do read, I think, more than most. It's definitely something I've got, I think, 5 or 6 books on my desk at the moment that are ready to read, and not much progress has been made on those in the last couple of months. So, but definitely reading is an aspect. And sometimes it's not what you're reading about, it's the thoughts that the reading elicits. So you read a book about something, it takes your brain down a particular pathway. And then when you're doing that morning walk, because I do the morning walk, they call it naked. I'm not literally naked, but no electronics, you know? So I'm
just let your head float.
Yeah, just let your head float. And you really do get a lot of inspiration, but this is also a great time where you're filtering some of the stuff that you've perhaps picked up in a book or read about, but applying it in a completely different way or a completely different kind of thought process. So yeah, that's really kind of useful. Reading is really useful from the way it stimulates your brain, not just the information that you get from it. And then most of the rest of the learning comes from doing. We do deals, we figure out what went right, what went wrong. We have these events in the Harbour Club community called Deal Fest, which are literally just people sharing their case studies. And so obviously I learn from them, they learn from the deals that I'm doing. And this is hugely valuable because instead of just being in your own little world doing stuff, you're exposing what you're doing to other people. They're questioning it, they're asking stuff, you're having to think what the answer to that is. So that also gets you thinking about things in a different way. And that's probably where most of the development in what we do comes from, is from these Deal Fest events we run in our community.
You mentioned there being present and focus with walking with no technology. You are from a generation slightly older than me, where you originally didn't have mobile phones with like Instagram, WhatsApp, all this crap. Do you find it hard to focus more now, or you have to consciously try not to get distracted? Maybe.
Yeah, no, it's their evil things, aren't they? I'm seeing it with my kids as well. It's really bad. I mean, having said that, my kids will sit on their iPads and watch YouTube, and we'll kind of take the iPad away, and then they'll go and watch telly and watch Netflix. And actually, Netflix has every program is so woke now. I actually prefer they watch YouTube.
I watched a Netflix program. There was a tranny in it. I was like, what the fuck is this about? Like,
so I mean, it's not not just that. It's just they seem to have an agenda. It's like a tick box, within a few seconds.
Quota,
within a few seconds of it starting, it has to be rammed down your throat. All these different agendas have to be, they have to mention certain things, or certain things have to happen, and it just and it doesn't reflect normal life. I mean, I grew up in a cosmopolitan city. I've been to gay clubs. I've done all these kind of things, and it's fine, but when it seems to be this like orchestrated kind of ramming down your throat and making it look like it's everybody, when in fact it's like a smaller percentage of the population, it makes it very difficult. So anyway, electronic devices, so the phones are a real challenge, and I probably need to give up my phones more. I'm guilty of spending too much time scrolling or looking or just addictively picking it up to see what's happening. And it's not helped by the fact that you now cannot function in society without a phone. No. So your UAE pass is on your phone, your RTA pass is on your phone, all of your banking has to be done with either the phone or a token that comes to your phone. So it's no longer something you can get rid of, which is makes it even more difficult.
I had that at the Atlantis hotel here, to be fair, once, where I was like, I literally don't want to look at my phone, like turned it off, and they turned up as like, the map is on your phone. It's like, dude, I don't want to use my phone, because you see something and then you're in. Like,
my kids we were in Chinatown yesterday, and my kids wanted this hot pot, and you go in for hot pot, and it says put your phone number before you can look at the menu. Yeah. Put your phone number in, and it sends you a fucking OTP to look at the menu. It's like, what the? It's getting ridiculous.
With you buying businesses all over the world, is there a difference between selling a business, say, in Dubai, US, UK? Where's the easiest to sell?
Good question. I mean, look, we only do, actually, I haven't done a deal in Dubai. I live here, and doing deals in the place I live has never been one of my kind of criteria.
You purposely avoid that?
No, not really. It's just, it's not one of the criteria around the place that I live. If one comes along, I will do it, but we're not actively looking or anything. So most of the deals we do are the UK, US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. We've done a couple in Singapore, but again, because I lived there for 12 years, that wouldn't typically be a target. All of those countries have good rule of law, English basis law, and it's very easy to buy and sell things, very easy to prove you own stuff, very easy to enforce ownership of stuff. I mean, here is also loosely based on English, or built on English law. The underlying law is common law, which is the same as English law. So there's I think the opportunity to do deals would be here, but I've not done deals here. So, but I mean, in terms of where's best, don't have a strong opinion on that. I mean, the US is by far the biggest, probably the hardest to buy or harder to buy businesses, but there's still lots of opportunities there. Relatively easier to sell than the UK or Australia, for example. But yeah.
Looking back at when you were at school selling stuff to where you are now, do you think all of this was going to happen?
No, not at all. No, in fact, I think a really helpful exercise as you go through life is to look at where you were 10 years before and see where you are now. And I think, you should be enormously proud of where you are now compared to where you were 10 years ago. So, and I think I've achieved that in each of the decades. I was 50 in last year, so I'm still 50. So if I look at me when I'm 50, me when I'm 40, me when I'm 30, me when I'm 20, then it's an astonishing. Each one of those levels wouldn't believe where I was now. Of course, ambitions and dreams and everything else are what I've achieved is a fraction of what I've dreamt about. But I would also be super happy with the position that I find myself in.
Did you ever get to the point where you lost the meaning of money to some degree because you were earning so much? It was like a coffee. What's it like? It just
it does start to get. And so when I started buying companies, it was very acute because I went from not being able to find $2,500 to buy my first company to having a payroll of $250,000 a month, and that happened in like 18 months. So that was like a really rapid kind of boom moment, and then I can't put my finger on exactly when it was, but I just remember there was a time where I stopped looking at prices for things, and it was probably about 10 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago, and it drives my wife nuts because we'll go to a restaurant and we'll leave and she goes, "How much was that?" I have no idea. And she goes, like, roughly, like 500, 2,000? I have no idea. Like, literally no idea. And the same with supermarket shopping. You know, have InstaShop here. So you just go on InstaShop and you go, this, and you buy it and it comes and she'll say, "How much was the shopping?" I go, "I have no idea." And so there was a tipping point where I started to do that. But then there's still things that I go, "Ooh, fuck, that's a lot of money." Like, I think we booked the flights to Geneva, and I think there were 70,000 dirhams, which is like 17.5 grand US. You know, it's quite a lot.
Yeah, I paid exactly the same to go to LA and back for two people. I'm like, it's fucking feels like you're lighting the money on fire at some point.
Yeah, and you're like, but I remember, I mean, it's not an issue, but I remember thinking that's a lot. Because, you know, there's a lot of times in my life where that would have been like a life-changing sum of money, or certainly would have had an impact on me. And so, you still have those moments where, you know, you still recognise the value of money and you still realise when something is too much, but you have the ability to do it anyway.
What would be your best financial advice for people who are making money, who are maybe sub 40 listening to this, which is our core demographic, in terms of how to grow that wealth and not be reckless with their finances?
Yeah, so look, I think the key thing is making a habit out of investing. So the first thing is keep a personal balance sheet, because everything measured improves.
So your own personal expenses.
Yeah, so or just a balance sheet, what you have invested, what you're worth, you know, what's your net worth, and review that every week. So I do it every Friday, and so in the Harbour Club community they call it Financial Freedom Friday, and the idea is that if you're constantly reviewing it, it tends to get better. If you take your eye off the ball, it doesn't move, but if you're watching it on a regular basis, it improves. So everything measured improves. Like weighing yourself every morning, it tends to get better. So and then the next thing is to create a habit around improving it. So do things on a regular basis that improve it, and try and avoid the kind of concentration bias that tends to come with investing, which is, if you love Bitcoin, you tend to put everything in Bitcoin. If you love real estate, you tend to put everything in real estate. So one of the ways that I often say to people to do it is to create like 5 buckets. For example, one bucket is stocks, one bucket is real estate. I tend to use real estate investment trusts as opposed to physical real estate because it's more liquid. The next bucket might be fixed income, which is like bonds and things like that. The next one might be a derivative income fund, like option strategies. And the last one would be the conviction thing, like the Bitcoin or the Tesla or the Nvidia or the thing that you feel you want to buy loads of. And then each one has a value, so you can make it 20 grand per bucket, which means when they're all full it's 100 grand, or you can make it 100 grand per bucket, so when they're all full it's 500 grand. But you basically pour everything into the first bucket. When that's full, everything goes to the second one, and so forth. And you can't put a penny into that bucket until that one's full, and you can't, and so on. And it just creates some discipline around the allocation. So that you allocate in a disciplined way going forwards and don't over allocate to your favorite thing. So yeah, it helps quite a lot of people.
It's interesting you say that, because I've done that habit for the last 3 to 5 years of tracking that every week on a Friday. I go through all our company accounts, every bank statement.
Yeah.
But now it's the point where I do it every single day. Not every day I go through all the bank statements, but I'll go through like all the bank accounts, my crypto, what's everything worth.
Yeah.
Just so it's like front
So
line.
what you should also then do is, from all of those accounts and everything, sweep all of the cash and put it into one of the buckets.
Yeah.
So the buckets then fill up, so that every week it's not only looking at where everything is, but allocating as well. So that always allocating every week, and then you'll be amazed how quickly that takes off. And the end goal, or the mid-term end goal, should be to make the income from your investments cover your expenses. So if you figure out what your day-to-day cost of survival is, and then make your income from your investments cover that means everything you earn can then be allocated. So that's when it starts to snowball up in value.
What net worth now do you think is financial freedom?
Yeah, it gets more. I mean, we're in this very inflationary time, and it's different for different people, because different people have different ambitions. I mean, the one thing that I've learned is that income is just what you spend. So if you increase your income, you'll just spend more. So you have to have capital, and you have to have capital that generates income. Otherwise, you'll never escape. You'll be constantly trapped. And then just write it down. Figure out what's your cost of survival, and figure out what it is. I mean, if I talk to you about what we spend, it's eye-watering. I'm almost embarrassed. So it's like it's just so beyond what I ever thought was a normal amount of money. And so you can't use me as a benchmark for what would be normal, because most people 20, 30, 40, 50 grand a month is kind of their best life ever. So build an investment portfolio that delivers that.
Would you say 10% returns on, say you had $5 million net worth, 10% returns of $500,000 a year would be realistic?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there are, if you go into the kind of boring vanilla type stuff, you're going to generate 6 or 7%. And if you go into perhaps either a little bit of leverage or a little bit of risk, so slightly, but still in the kind of bonds and stocks arena, you'll get a little bit over 10. And then the aggregate of that, you can probably get to 10 reasonably comfortably.
Awesome. Big thank you for your time, Sir Jeremy. Where's the best place for people to find out more about you? Harbour Club, potentially?
Instagram, probably. Instagram or X. On Instagram, it's Jeremy Harbour with the blue tick. Not the one that's trying to sell you crypto, because people keep copying my account all the time. Or then go to harbourclubevents.com. Harbour spelled the British way, so it's Harbour. But yeah.
Awesome. Big thank you for your time. Everyone took a load of value from the podcast. Make sure you subscribe, give Jeremy a follow, and I'll see you next episode.
Fantastic. Thank you.